Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 3rd, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are agendas on both sides of the room. If you'd like to pick one up and follow along with us tonight, there will be various opportunities for public comment, both on items that are on our agenda for discussion this evening, as well as a section for general comment on matters that are not appearing on our agenda tonight. It is customary for us to begin our meetings by standing and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point in time, I would ask you to please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As we are now in the second quarter of 2012, it's time to ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt? Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. First item we have on item 3 of our agenda are approval of minutes of council meetings. We have one set of minutes to approve, and those are our regular council meeting minutes for March 20th, 2012. Do I have, well, let me ask you this. Are there any changes or corrections?
Yes, Mayor. I forwarded a correction to the village clerk.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other changes or corrections to the minutes from March 20, 2012? Hearing no further changes or corrections, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes, as corrected by Commissioner Waldeck, are approved. Now, it is my privilege and pleasure to point out some well-deserved recognitions and acknowledgments tonight. And good news always travels in threes, at least that's what I've been told. So we have 3 items tonight. The first is with respect to celebrating Telecommunicators Week and recognizing some of our own in that regard. And to kick things off, I think I'd like to ask Chief Porter to please join us at the podium and introduce the subject. We have a more aerodynamic police chief tonight.
I like good news. This week, if you haven't heard, is National Telecommunicators Week, and we have a couple representatives from our dispatch center here today. Jenny Rizzo and Heather Lippy, if you'd like to step up. And I just wanted to take a couple minutes tonight to really recognize not only the work that these 2 ladies have done for the village in VOC. It's been a crazy year for us with consolidating 2 dispatch centers into one and keeping things going smoothly. It's been quite a challenge, and Jenny and Heather have done an outstanding job with that project. I also want to recognize all of our dispatchers for all the work that they've done in making this project a success, and also their day-to-day responsibilities. I always look at the dispatchers of any agency as kind of the unsung heroes. They're the ones that you count on when our citizens call 911, and they're the ones that we count on in the police and fire service to respond appropriately. So they don't get enough credit, so I definitely want to make sure that I acknowledge them today and for all their efforts. So thank you, Jenny, Heather, and all of our dispatchers. We really appreciate all the work that they do.
Well, thank you, Chief. I want to make sure that we also appropriately recognize you because, of course, when someone's in trouble and they pick up the phone, the first voice that they hear with respect to that emergency is yours. So that's really important before they come into contact with anyone else. And also want to compliment you on, for the first time ever, having to deal with the joining of 2 different dispatch centers. That's never been done before. And you probably feel a little bit older because of it all. But we do have a proclamation to read in recognition of Telecommunicators Week, and then I'd like to call you up and I'll walk down in a moment and hand this to you, but allow me to read it first so that everyone at home can hear it and share in it as well. Proclamation. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas dedicated Downers Grove Village Operations Center telecommunicators daily serve the citizens of the village by answering their telephone calls for police, fire, and emergency services, and by coordinating the dispatch of emergency response equipment. And whereas telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. Whereas millions of people depend on the skill, expertise, and commitment of public safety professionals who aid in providing 911 emergency assistance to citizens across our nation. And whereas each telecommunicator exhibits compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their jobs, Now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of April 8th through 14th, 2012 as Telecommunicators Week. You get your own week. In the Village of Downers Grove, in honor and recognition of our telecommunicators and the vital contributions that they make to the safety and well-being of our citizens. And if you please join me up in front, I'd like to present you with the proclamation. First, I just want to make sure that if I call, you answer the phone then. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Moving right along, as I said, good news travels in threes. The next item I'd like to acknowledge and recognize the accomplishments and national recognition of our own Marcia Giesler. And with that, Chief Jackson, please introduce this topic
Right here, we're going to put you on
in a way that will be far more eloquent and professional than I possibly could.
That's right. Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you've already heard through the various media sources about Marcia Giesler, she's the assistant chief to the fire. She's assistant to the fire. Yeah, promotion. She's assistant to the fire chief for community education, public information officer. But she's been recently nominated as the 2012 Life Safety Educator of the Year. She's receiving this national award for her outstanding achievements in fire safety education. And as I continue on tonight, you'll get an understanding of how this is a well-deserved award. Marcia, previously a school teacher, joined the fire department almost 20 years ago with a bachelor's degree in education with no previous background in the fire service. Being eager as she is, Marcia enrolled in Basic Fire Academy program to get a clear understanding of fire and its effects. As she grew into her public education within the fire department, she immediately became very familiar with the fire service and the many demands that go with it. As Marcia began her teaching, she utilized the many programs that NFPA provided to teach our children fire safety throughout the year. These programs are still a part of her daily curriculum to teach fire safety behavior to children ages preschool through 4th grade throughout the Downers Grove community. Her previous background as a school teacher gives her a unique ability to take the life safety programs and materials and communicate it to children in the manner they can relate to, motivating them to be safer while advocating preventable injuries. Marcia's drive for teaching fire safety to the school children is not limited to the various programs that NFPA offers. She has developed many life safety programs on her own to maintain the interest of the children as well as adults. Some of these programs are Passport to Safety, Adopt a Firefighter, What's Hot and What's Not, and where she's best known as her alter ego, Edith the Clown. These are just a few of the many programs she's developed to make sure the fire safety message was well written, as other departments have taken these actual curriculums and copied them. Children are not the only ones to receive the benefits of Marcia's teachings. Marcia also conducts fire safety presentations and evacuation drills for the high-rises in our town, many of which are residential, mostly are senior citizens. Her involvement in the Remembering When program have developed many older adults living in nursing homes, assisted living centers, and independent living centers to be more aware of the increased risks of falls and what they can do to avoid them. She also teaches fire prevention to these individuals with 8 key safety messages geared towards fire safety. Marcia does not know the word no. Marcia belongs to many committees in the state, such as the Illinois Fire Inspectors, where she developed criteria for certification for fire inspector and life safety educator program. She developed the public education curriculum for the Fire Officer 3 for the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association. Marcia also participates at a national level with a Vision 2020 committee, and she also presents at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Marcia completed her master's degree in organizational management and recently authored a 400-page book entitled Fire and Life Safety Educator, which is now a state curriculum. As you can see, Marcia is a very busy person. Her dedication to the fire department, the loyalty and belief in the programs she promotes, makes her an exceptional educator. Her energy and enthusiasm inspires others to get involved in these programs to promote safety throughout the year. Her ability to motivate others is reflected in the outstanding community involvement during the many events that are held throughout our year. Marcia is a true leader and innovator. Her passion, enthusiasm, creativity, and vision has brought the fire department, as well as the fire service, to a new level. She is an asset to the department, the village, and the fire service industry. Our children and our community are a safer place because of the outstanding work she does every day. So please join me in congratulating Marcia Giesler for the NFPA 2012 Life Safety Educator of the Year.
Okay, I didn't think I was going to say anything, but that never stops me. I just have to say how lucky I am to receive an award for a job that I absolutely love. And I'm so lucky to work for a department that values education as part of its firefighting efforts. It has a place and it does have an impact, we know that, and I need to thank the Village of Downers Grove for always having supported fire and life safety education as part of our department's efforts. The firefighters, you know, nobody does any of this alone, and we are so fortunate that these firefighters that are rough and tumble and put themselves in danger all the time, I wish you could see them in front of children and working with older adults. They make it work, along with our partnerships with the hospital and the school and the police department. Doug Kozlowski's department has been invaluable. So there are a lot of people to thank for this. And thank you, Chief Jackson, for your commitment to education and for that long thing you read. But anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm very appreciative of the whole thing. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, Marcia. We of course, know you well in the community. I think there's probably very few employees of the village who are in the paper more than you are, between Passport to Safety and Learn Not to Burn, and of course we get to see it when you present here with the kids. And so we've always known how special your service is to the community, but it's nice to see that the outside world recognizes that as well. So congratulations on a well-deserved award, and thank you for your outstanding service to our community.
Thank you.
All right. I wish every night was like this. And now we have one more. We also have to recognize and acknowledge another outstanding accomplishment in national recognition by our own police department, by CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. And once again, if I can invite up Chief Porter to explain to everyone just exactly what this is, what it means, and what a difficult to attain achievement and recognition this really is, and what it means.
Certainly. Thank you. Just for a little bit of background, last Saturday, March 24th, we appeared in front of the Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation, and they had re-accredited us for another 3-year period. If Council can remember that this past November, we actually had an on-site review with the CALEA assessment team. It's never a fun process, but it's definitely a much-needed process. They come through and they go through all of our files, over 400 policies. They do staff interviews. They do a public hearing. They interview various public officials through the community, and it's a very comprehensive review that we go through every 3 years. I was extremely grateful and honored when I saw the final report that was outstanding. We had 100% compliance, and that's not easy to do. They really go through your department and they interview staff, and we just did very well. So it's good news. It's something that I think is definitely a credit to the agency. It's a credit to the people that work in our department. It was always gratifying to hear the CALEA commissioners talk about the services that we provide in the community and the quality and professionalism of our staff. The support that we get from our fine manager and our village mayor, our mayor and council, and more importantly, the community. It really came through just how much the community respects our police department and the partnerships that we have. And this process was really grateful, or very honoring, or very humbling for a police chief. You know, I always, when I look at the nature of our business, I really look at our accreditation process as almost like driving a car with, I look at CALEA as our motor oil. And you can always drive a car for a while, but if you don't have oil in your engine, sooner or later you're going to have a breakdown. And I think our policies, our devotion to CALEA, I think really makes the difference in keeping our department as professional as we are. So I want to thank all of you for your support. I want to thank the community. I want to thank our accreditation team. it was definitely a win for the department, and I was very, very proud.
Well, we're very proud as well, and congratulations on that achievement. Once again, I think we know how exceptionally professional the department is, and in our hearts, of course, it exceeds all standards, but it's nice when an outside national organization recognizes that through the application of objective standards. I do remember one thing when I was talking to the CLEA on-site investigators, and the one thing they had concerns with was, and they kept kidding me about, that darn police station.
I didn't pay him to say that.
When are you guys going to get them a modern police station? That was the one thing that they said to me. So duly noted. But once again, congratulations on an outstanding accomplishment.
Great, thank you.
And thanks to you and the entire force for all that you do. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, public comments. This is the section on the agenda when we entertain questions or comments of a general nature with respect to matters that are not on our agenda tonight. So if anyone has any questions or comments of a general nature, the custom would be to come down to the podium. Please share with us your name and address, and we would welcome your comments. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you very much. My name is Wallace H. Brown. I live at 1308 Gilbert Avenue in Downers Grove. I seem to be getting snared into watching freight trains, which is not my favorite subject. But I had mentioned it to the mayor earlier, and somebody's looking into it. I don't know about rules and so on that the railroads have. I know years ago they had rules, and I think they probably still do, but I don't know what they are. But we have changed dramatically in the kind of traffic that's running up and down this little sleepy commuter line that we used to have here. And we have at least 12 freight trains a day, and probably more than that, I don't know, but that's a lot more than we had in the past. I just happened to be looking out my kitchen window trying to get my breakfast, and I saw a couple of tank cars. I'm concerned about tank cars, the separation of the tank cars. They are dangerous, especially if you have any kind of wreck or anything, and they have, even if they're empty, they usually have some vapors in them and they blow up. They do all kinds of things. But at any rate, I think the mayor was going to look into that somehow or other. I don't know if he has or not, but today it startled me because I saw a couple of tank cars, and whenever I see tank cars, I start counting. Well, when I got to 50, I thought, gee, that's a lot of tank cars for one train with no separation between any of the cars. And so I thought I'd come and report that and ask for, I guess, maybe a little more action with the railroads, because that could be very dangerous. And of course, it's never a problem until you have a wreck or something. Then it's too late, you know. So I thought perhaps I would report that this was a westbound freight around, oh, I don't know what time, probably 10:30, 10 o'clock, I don't know. Anyhow, it was going westbound, and when I got to 55, I quit counting because my coffee was starting to get cold. So there were over 50 cars in that train, and there were no separations of any kind between these tankers. And I just thought I would make a note of that, and also hopefully you'll make a note of that, and maybe we could get some kind of a feedback from the railroad. I don't know, the railroads are easier to get along with than when I was dealing with them, but they're not a whole lot easier. So that's my statement for whatever it's worth.
If I could ask a question, Mr. Brown, what day was that you made the observation of 55 cars? Do you recall?
Today?
No, what day was it that was today that you viewed that? When did you see the 55 tank cars? What day?
Today.
That was today. That was this morning.
Right.
Okay,
it was today, April 3rd.
Thank you. Gotcha.
And they were mostly the black tank cars that we see, but they have other kinds. They got some light colored ones and so on. I don't know what all that is, but
Well, I think last time you brought this topic to our attention, I think we pointed out that there is a Director of Public Affairs who's responsible for Illinois
Yes.
at BNSF. That's Amy McBeth. And I don't know if we ever put a call in just to find out if there are standards that we could at least share, because I think one of the things to understand is what are there standards and what are they? Because it could be that they're allowed to have 75. I don't know.
We did do some research. We worked with Pat Castler, our communicator that we work with on a regular basis at the railroad, and we did actually find some answers for you, Mr. Brown, so I will find that report online here, and I'll print it out for you and get it over to you.
I appreciate that. I really hope there aren't too many answers which would prove that they never had any wrecks, but we know that that's not true. They do have derailments and things, so I was really startled today. That's what brought me out tonight, was over 60 tank cars in a row. That's just about all they had in the yard.
At some point, we ought to see if maybe we can put the BNSF representative directly in touch with Mr. Brown. That might eliminate the middleman, so to speak.
Well, you know, we shouldn't be the only town that's concerned about this. I mean,
Let's see,
if we were really unlucky and they had an
something to share.
accident, I'm sure it happened outside this window here, but every town along here would be possibly have a problem, you know.
One would think.
So if we needed help, I would think we could get some, but thank you.
I would imagine so.
That's all I.
There have been other issues where all the towns along the railroad line are certainly of like-minded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments of a general nature, please? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council.
Wally, how are you?
Wally Brown was on the task force that Brian Krajewski set up for the Belmont Underpass, and he spent a lot of time in meetings, and I was on that task force also, so it kind of surprised me to see Wally here and talk about trains, because that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. Just to kind of enlighten Wally as to how many trains during the weekday, there's close to 200 trains a day that go back and forth, east and west, along the Burlington Northern. About half of them are Metro trains, and during the weekend there's far less Metro trains than on the weekdays. The Burlington Northern in the annual report, probably 3 years ago, estimated that there's going to be, I think in the next 20 years, there's going to be like a 20 to 30% increase in train traffic. Trains are getting longer. They're getting slower. There's just so many trains, even though it's a 3-track system. There's so many trains on the line, they're just getting slower. Hardly a day goes by now where you don't hear about an accident in the Chicagoland area. Some of it may be suicide, some of it may be accidents. And sometimes it's really hard to tell what's a suicide, what's an accident. The one that happened last November on Main Street, the last time I checked with the coroner's office, which was about 2 months ago, it was ruled as undetermined. I read the police report. To me, it was an accident. But that's just in response to Wally's comments. But and Wally kind of surprised me when he started talking about trains. I did want to start my comments with thanking Chief Porter, the Fire Chief Jackson, for just things that I've observed in my connections with them over the years. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I took the dog for a walk about 3:30 in the morning. We had a car burglar. Someone called the police. The police were there, I would say, within a minute at 3:30 in the morning. That's pretty unbelievable. I've seen 2 accidental deaths. One was last year on Dunham Avenue, where a gentleman with a snowblower, he must have had a heart attack. He died. When the paramedics came there, they were all business. And I had commented to Chief Jackson that somebody from the Public Works Department was there. He was there before I was, and I was like the second person on the scene giving chest compression CPR. So the whole village of Downers Grove, I've lived here for a number of years. I'm really impressed. I think everybody does a real nice job. I'd like to kind of switch because I want to talk about Main Street, I want to talk about Washington, I want to talk about Forest Avenue, and I want to talk about a plan developed some 60 years ago about raising the track bed, not going below like at Belmont, not going above, but just raising the track bed. And I'd like to kind of start by, the Sunday Tribune had a well-written article about a police officer, Del Pearson, who was shot in the line of duty in Chicago. A bullet just went above his vest. It hit a main artery, a large artery. He was starting to bleed out. He was bleeding out. The police officers, when they arrived, they couldn't wait for an ambulance. They thought it was just too much loss of blood. They threw him in the back of a squad car. They took him to Trinity Hospital. Trinity Hospital was somewhat alerted that he was going to be arriving. They did what they could, but Trinity Hospital is not a trauma center. So Trinity Hospital sent him to Christ Hospital. They did what they could. They sent him to Christ Advocate Hospital. On the way to Christ Advocate Hospital, the police had cordoned off 95th Street. There was a nurse in the back of the ambulance. They went over some railroad tracks. Fortunately, there were no trains passing by, because if there were trains passing by, God knows what would have happened. He arrived at Christ Hospital. They rushed him into the emergency room. He had a number of problems, but the main thing they wanted to do was stop the bleeding. The doctor who was on call, she called for another emergency room surgeon. They were able to stop the bleeding. They put some plastic in this large plastic tubing in this large vessel that was shattered, and they were able to save his life. And a week afterwards, he went home. As I read the article, I got emotional. I've seen a lot. It takes a lot to get me emotional. But I thought of two friends of mine who were Chicago police officers who were killed in the line of duty. Tom Kelly, who was killed in 1970. I was in boot camp with him. And Bill Bozak, he was on my mortar squad for about 5 years. He was shot in the line of duty and killed. So this article really struck home to me. And I really hadn't planned to come to the council and talk for a while. I was here in November, and about once a year is enough for me. But I decided I want to kind of tell everybody how important that golden hour is. And the north side of those tracks and the south side of the tracks, they're like in a different time zone almost when there's freight trains going. I mean, you have to wait and wait and wait. Southbound tracks, they're backed up past Franklin, past Prairie, past Grant. The northbound train congestion is way past Curtis, way past Maple. So, and there's going to be more trains. There's no question about it. So, as elected officials, now, Mayor Cheever, she was involved in the underpass. She didn't get really going, but Brian Krajewski, Mayor Krajewski, he formed a task force. We came up with funding. It cost the village practically nothing. I think at the end they paid $35,000 for a lobbyist to do some get some additional funding. But if we hadn't had the plans in place, if we have some funding already dedicated to us, we wouldn't have got the additional funding. In Congress now, there's a transportation bill that just got a 90-day extension. But one of the things they say is that unless you have plans in place, unless you have something that's shovel-ready, it's difficult to get funding. If you do have things that are shovel-ready, if you do have a plan in place, funding becomes much easier. There's billions of dollars dedicated to highway safety, to railroad safety, to improving roads, to reducing congestion. As elected officials, I look at it, either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. So I would like this council to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Swimmer. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, Commissioners, staff. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Midaw, and I wanted to speak to you about a topic different from the one that you've been hearing about, but before I do that, I'd like to also join in and say that I think it's a very important topic of the railroad crossings that you should certainly address. I agree that I've seen increases in the traffic of trains, and with the economy improving, that can only get much more serious for the village. We've got one underpass off on the west side of town, but we need some other ways to cross the Burlington tracks at these other points in town. And as Mr. Schwimmer pointed out, there are other more creative ways that perhaps won't cost as much as the Belmont underpass, and I'm hoping that the village and staff will pursue that and try to find some way that we can have another closer to the center of town where we have great separation. The topic that I really wanted to tell you about is concerning the Downers Grove Concert Association and a series of very fine classical music concerts that we offer in the community with internationally acclaimed artists. On the 15th of April, we're very pleased to have the cooperation of Midwestern University and to be able to present Alan Goldstein, an internationally acclaimed pianist, at Midwestern University's Little John Hall at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He'll be playing selections of Janáček, Schubert, Debussy, and Chopin. It will be quite a spectacular recital, and it's open to the public, the community, free of charge. There will be no tickets required. You can come to the door. Midwestern University is normally a closed campus, but at that time the guards will admit people to the concert without any problem. So I'm encouraging people throughout the community 2 weeks from now, well, 10 days now, to come to Midwestern University for a very fine classical music concert on Sunday afternoon. Then on the 3rd of June, we'll be offering a final concert at the North High School, Johnson Auditorium. We're presenting a very fine program of a string quartet, the Ariel String Quartet, and another very fine pianist who will work with the quartet, Menachem Pressler. Menachem Pressler was a soloist at the first season of the Downers Grove Concert Association 65 years ago, and it's amazing how well he performs at this stage. He's 88 years old, but he has an international following and travels to Europe and throughout the United States to offer these concerts. So that is also a free concert at the Downers Grove North High School on the afternoon of Sunday, June 3rd. And this is essentially a farewell gift to the community from the Downers Grove Concert Association. We've decided that it's time for us, after 65 years, to conclude our concerts. So I'm hoping that the community will come and take advantage of these last very fine free concerts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Hi. I'm Tom Wagner. I live at 503 Lake Avenue. And I just wanted to let you know, I dropped off a one-page sheet concerning some requests I have with work on the parkway at the west end of Lake Avenue. I'm hoping it could be wrapped up it just needs some grass seed or setting and some rototilling or whatever, but it's been 4 months. So I dropped these off at Civic Hall yesterday, copies in each of your mailbox, if you could check that for me. Okay, thank you.
We'll take a look at it and take a look into it. Thank you very much. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and the Council. Bill Roble, 7800 Queens Court in Downers Grove. I've been a member of the Downers Grove Concert Association and Artist Showcase West for many, many years. And I have to parrot what Gordon Goodman says. I'm very sorry to see the Concert Association come to an end of its long career. It has been a very valuable asset to the village of Downers Grove. Enough said about that. But as you know, I'm also a cultural advocate of the Chicago Theater Organ Enthusiasts who maintain and play the organ, the Wurlitzer organ at the Tivoli. And on Saturday, the 31st of March, I attended a meeting of the Chicago Theater Organs Association at the Tivoli, and it was marvelous to see a theater organ like we have at the Tivoli being played by a gentleman by the name of Carl, who plays the organ at the Orbit roller rink in Aurora, accompanied by a beautiful woman songstress named Kenneth, and see them together, the organ and the songstress with a gown standing against this beautiful red curtain in the Tivoli, our Tivoli. It brought back memories of a concert hall here in Downers Grove. And I just wanted to share what the enthusiasm I had, and I hope that I'll be able to talk with Willis and Shirley Johnston and to encourage other performers like this to come and perform, perhaps as a prelude to our regular movies on Fridays and Saturday evenings. If you're old enough, you might remember when I was a kid, we went down to the Chicago Theater and other illustrious theaters, and it was preceded by a stage show. So, brought back memories. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that the Historic Theater Association will be here in Chicago for its annual convention in July, and they will be visiting and enjoying the hospitality of the Tivoli Theater in Downers Grove. So you stay tuned for that, because it's people from all over the country as well as all over the world will be visiting our Tivoli and experiencing the sounds of the Wurlitzer. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roble. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Yes, please, ma'am, come down, join us at the podium. Welcome. Be glad to hear from you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Gloria Wagner. I live at 503 Lake, and I just wanted to respond to the man who spoke about the policeman in the article in the Tribune, which I also read, which was excellent. I just wanted to point out that we are so fortunate to have Good Sam Hospital, which is the level 1 trauma unit. But I understand it's the only hospital between here and the Illinois-Iowa state line that is a level 1 trauma. And I often hear from people in the area that go to emergency. It is so busy that they choose not to go there. They'll go to Hinsdale instead. And I think that's sad. I don't know what can be done about that, because you would think another hospital between here and the state line would also be level 1, but it's not. And another thing I wanted to talk about is that I am a great customer of Caputo's grocery store. And we have none in the area. And I understand that they have tried to get in Dominic's at 75th and Lamont. And I guess my point for telling you this, and I don't know if anything can be done at your level, I would think it would be the owner of the shopping center and Caputo's itself. But it's a fabulous store. Each of their stores in the area really have a good patronage. For your information.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We'd obviously like to see someone high quality occupy the space.
Well, not only there, anywhere in the area.
Sure.
And another point is that Oak Brook.
Actually, if you could come to the microphone, ma'am, otherwise the folks at home can't hear you. Thank you.
Another point regarding that is that Oak Brook has a big Italian population. They do not have one grocery store in the whole suburb. And I think they would be great customers here, and it would bring tax dollars in.
Well, thank you for the suggestion.
And they make great Italian sausage.
Well, it's past my dinner time now. You've made me hungry. Any other questions or comments of a general nature? Hearing none, we'll move to item 5 on our agenda, which pertains to public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda, of which there are quite a few? Seeing none, any questions or comments with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda from any members of the council? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to our active agenda. We have 3 items on our active agenda tonight. The first item, it would be 7A. Do I have a motion to authorize a salary increase for the village attorney as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move to authorize a 3% annual salary increase for village attorney Enzo Petarca, effective May 1st, 2011, and a 3% salary increase effective May 1st, 2012.
Second. Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience with respect to this matter? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to this matter? The only thing that I'll just point out is that obviously the last couple of years have been very difficult, and this is sort of a catch-up. The village attorney has had an adjustment in several years, and like other members of the village staff, participated in wage freezes and furlough days. So we're getting back caught up to where we think we ought to be. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Nay.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes 4-1. No, 5-1. I can count. 5-1. That new stat not being here threw me off. That brings us item 7B. Do I have a motion to amend certain rates charged for water?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item, 7B? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to this item? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 7C. Do I have a motion to approve a resolution declaring official intent regarding certain capital expenditures to be reimbursed from the proceeds of an obligation? We're going to have to explain what that is.
So moved, Mayor.
This is what's commonly referred to as a reimbursement resolution. It basically means that when we issue the 2012 bonds that we've been talking about for 3 or 4 years, when that actually happens, any costs that we've incurred on the street and water main projects that have been incurred before the issuance of the bonds, this says that we can use those proceeds to pay ourselves back.
That's much better. Thank you. I heard a second. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item?
First I made the second.
Right.
Oh, I said I heard a second.
Yeah.
But thank you for making sure that I did. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item 7C? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council with respect to this item? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a number of comments I did want to make regarding the bonding. I'm sure many of you have heard my comments about the preference for a pay-as-you-go program for capital projects. I will save a lot of those comments for when we actually vote on the bonds. I do support going forward with the with projects that this money would go towards, and that money is available on as a pay-as-you-go basis. It isn't dependent on the passing of these particular bonds. However, I don't feel that we need to indebt the village by the $25 million. I will support the $10 million that we planned on doing for the water fund, since we've discussed it. We already set plans in place as far as you'll notice your water rates are going up, the meter charges, etc. So I will be in support of a $10 million bond, but I cannot support a $25 million bond. And so while I will go into more detail when we finally get into the bonding, Section 2 of our ordinance or resolution tonight states that the maximum principal amount of the obligations expected to be issued for the project is not in excess of $35 million, and I would like to make a motion to adjust Section 2 to read that maximum principal amount of the obligations expected to be issued for the projects is not in excess of $10 million. And I make that motion now.
And there's a motion and a second with respect to the original item on the table. There's been, I'm going to take a motion to amend that has been made by Commissioner Waldeck. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second. I understood that this is sort of a anticipatory comment because we haven't actually got to the bonding yet. And the intent was to put a cap on the maximum amount that could be issued of $10 million and not $35 million. And I'll just point out that the $35 million is consistent with a long series of long-range financial planning discussions that we've had, and also acknowledge that Commissioner Waldeck has been consistent in his comments about how to go about funding some of the much-needed capital projects in town. And I take it that is what's behind the
intent.
Motion.
Thank you.
So the lack of a second, I think, and I'm not going to speak for anyone else, is primarily consistent with the prior long-range financial planning discussions that the council has had preceding today. So on the original, well, actually, let me make sure any of your questions or comments on the motion that has been seconded. Okay. And with respect to the motion, the original motion that has been seconded, roll call, please.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Waldeck?
Nay.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Motion passes 5-1. This time I can count right. And that brings us to the end of our active agenda and brings us to item 8 on our agenda tonight, which is our first reading. Our first reading is sort of our workshop section of our meetings where items are presented for more informal discussion for action at a later point in time. We have 6 items under our first reading tonight, and as is customary, we kick things off by turning over to Manager Fieldman, who I suspect is about to pass to Mr. Dave Reiner.
I was going to present all these items tonight myself, but since Tom is at the podium, our Community Development Director, Tom Dabereiner, will present 2 land use items, both subdivisions near Fairview Avenue. Tom?
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I've got 2 items on this first piece, which is an ordinance that's been prepared for a zoning ordinance map amendment to rezone a portion of the property located at 6622, 6650, and 6700 Fairview Avenue from R1 to R3 single-family residential. And secondly, a resolution for a final plat of subdivision has been prepared to subdivide the property into 13 new single-family lots plus 1 outlot. This is intended to cover items A and B under the first reading agenda.
A and B for those scoring at home.
Exactly. So we're looking for approval on the April 10th council agenda. I should mention too that I'll be referring to this probably from this point forward as the Atwood subdivision rather than listing the addresses over and over again. So the property is located on the west side of Fairview Avenue between 66th Street and 67th Court and is improved with 3 single-family homes currently. The single-family residences are located to the west and south of the property. Oak Trace Retirement Community is located to the east there. And this next slide actually shows some of the zoning classifications for the surrounding properties. A significant amount of R3 in the area. There are some R1 properties as well. Oak Trace Retirement Home is R5, and we have some other residential uses mixed in as well. So very much of a residential area and is consistent throughout. This is an aerial that shows the site now. Petitioner is proposing to demolish the existing 3 homes and construct a new street called Atwood Court with new residential lots on both sides of a cul-de-sac, and we've overlaid the site plan here. Again, the proposed subdivision would have 13 single-family lots and 1 lot designated for the stormwater detention in the northwest corner of the site. A blanket stormwater detention easement would be placed on the entirety of Lot 14 and designated for stormwater detention. The petitioner will pay park and school donations for the single-family homes. All proposed public improvements will meet the requirements of the subdivision ordinance as proposed. There are no exceptions being requested by the petitioner. The petitioner will create a homeowners association responsible for maintenance of the detention facility. If the association fails to maintain the detention facility, a special service area is being proposed by the petitioner. It would allow the village to levy a special tax on the property owners of Atwood, the Atwood subdivision. The SSA would appear on a future council agenda. The subdivision needs to be recorded. The properties need to receive PIN numbers. That's why we can't act on this at the same time as everything else that we're discussing. The proposed lots would meet all the minimum lot dimension requirements for an R3 single-family residential district. The subdivision is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Also, the rezoning of the property would allow for consistent zoning classification on the entire property and is consistent with surrounding uses and zoning classifications, as I showed in a previous slide. The Plan Commission considered the petition at their March 5th, 2012 meeting and found that the request met the standards of the subdivision and zoning ordinances. Plan Commission recommended unanimous approval. Staff concurs. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have Ken Newman of Greenscape and Chris Lavoie here to help with any answers as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to, let's take the first 2 items, 8A and B? Hearing any questions or comments, any members of the council? Commissioner Schnell.
Actually, 2 questions, and I apologize, they just popped up as you were talking. One, the covenants of the homeowners association is going to outline what maintenance needs to be done on the stormwater facility and how it would be measured. So if they don't meet those standards, then we would go in and do it and then charge them for it. Is that the idea?
That's the idea, correct.
Okay. And just because of what we're going to be voting on next week, you know, as one of the credits within the stormwater utility, if you have a regional stormwater facility, you get credits for that. Would this qualify for that?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Just, again, I think so people have a general idea of, you know, what we're talking about or what we'll be talking about next week. So thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. I just have 2 real quick questions. The first is, I didn't realize how green that whole area is with trees. Based on that drawing, are all those trees going to be eliminated? Or that layover of the map or the drawing?
Petitioner has indicated that they will save as many trees as they can, but with this kind of subdivision, most of the trees will come down.
Do we know how many trees they're going to try to preserve?
I think it said 33.
Yeah,
33? Okay.
It also said, though, that the quality of the trees were low.
Yeah, but I kind of think that's a common
Yeah, I don't know.
response.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
I had a few questions. So the new stormwater ordinance that you had said was approved or is going to the board today, how is that going to affect this development, if at all?
And this is a reference to the proposed new DuPage County stormwater ordinance that was approved by the DuPage County Stormwater Committee at its meeting this morning, is now being forwarded to the DuPage County Board itself for formal approval soon.
The petitioner will submit final engineering plans for review and approval that will conform to the codes that are in place at the time. We've been working with the petitioner. They're aware of the changing codes, and frankly, not a lot changes in the part of the code that affects the subdivision, so it will comply with the new code when it's in place.
Okay. I had some similar questions that Marilyn did about the special service area, but I think those were addressed. And just 1 minute. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
More comment than anything else. First, I want to thank staff for providing the references so that I can do additional homework between tonight and when we finally approve this. I'm very pleased to see that that there's no variances or anything being requested here. That's one of the first things I looked at was what are we asking for here, because it seems to be a very, very large project. So I was very encouraged by that, the intention to save trees and the report that we got on the trees, and just very pleased with that. I'll be happy to do the homework there and look at those references. I will have a comment on the pond situation coming up, but I think it's well presented, and to me it looks pretty good right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this area, as well as the other items we'll be talking about tonight, there's a fair amount of history that we have, so I think the fact that there's a project coming up here should be no surprise to anyone. Quite frankly, I think it's a good sign of where we're at overall in the economy, since this was actually in some way, shape, or form coming for some time and intended for some time. The question I had, of course, was with respect to the proposed SSA, but I understand that we'll take that up at that time. I do have some comments on that. I think, quite frankly, the idea is brilliant, and how to solve that issue that comes up every time there are detention areas that are put in as part of homeowners associations. So I'm very appreciative of the creativity that went into that, and there'll be more to come on that once we get into it, but I realize that now I'm giving anticipatory comments, so I'll stop. Commissioner Schnell, go ahead.
Are you done?
Yes.
Actually, Commissioner Waldeck's comment, one of the questions I asked you on Monday was about the depth of the detention pond, or the dry bottom detention pond, and whether or not it required a fence, and I didn't see that in the answers. Could you just get that to me before next week? Thanks. No.
Sorry, I missed that. We'll get that for you.
No, and we talked for a long time, so it's fine.
Thank you.
Not a big deal.
I think that's it. Any further questions on items 8A and B? Hearing none, I think that takes us to 8C as in cat.
All right. Caught me off guard while I was still writing notes. Next item relates to items C and E on the first reading agenda, and begins with a resolution for a final plat of subdivision which has been prepared to re-subdivide 3 existing lots into 2 new lots. The properties are located at 401 and 403 Lynn-Gramer Court and at 6568 Fairview Avenue. And this is part of the Green Acres subdivision that was approved in 2004. This is the approximate location of the Green Acres subdivision. And if we zoom in to an aerial here, you can see the original Green Acres subdivision is bounded in the light blue dashed line. It is zoned R3 single-family residential, located on the west side of Fairview Avenue, just north of 66th Street. The area that we're going to focus on is highlighted in the yellow here, lots 12, 13, and 14. In late 2011, the new owner of Green Acres subdivision completed on-site stormwater detention. And the shape of the pond was modified. Let's zoom into this area here. The shape of the pond was modified so that it does not take up all of lots 12, 13, and 14. And in fact, let me just kind of jump ahead here. In fact, it is largely confined to what is shown as Lot 2, or proposed Lot 2. So because the pond of the shape was modified, that makes this particular re-subdivision possible. There would be no changes to the remainder of the original Green Acre subdivision. The homeowner association would also be created, and that SSA concept would also apply here as proposed by the petitioner. The two proposed lots comply with sections 28.1103C and 28.1104C of the zoning ordinance. The required 5-foot public utility and drainage easements would also be provided. There's a little bit of a rearrangement that comes with that, given the fact that we're moving from 3 lots to 2. So that would be happening. That's one of the things under consideration. All other required public utility and drainage easements already exist and adequately anticipated to adequately serve the subdivision. There would be a new blanket stormwater detention easement placed over the new Lot 2. Actually, prefer, oops, wait a minute here. We'll just stick with that one. The petitioner is in the process of installing the remaining infrastructure. The majority of it is already in place. They will also install the remaining 7 trees on Lindgramer Court and 10 remaining trees along Devane Lane. There's a street light that will also be installed along Lindgramer Court. Park and school donations were paid by the original developer in this case, and the consolidation is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The Plan Commission considered this petition on March 5th, 2012, and found that the request met the standards of the subdivision and zoning ordinances, comprehensive plan, and recommended unanimous approval of the final plat of subdivision. Staff concurs. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and representatives from Greenscape are also here.
Thank you again, Mr. Dave Reiner. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to this item? Let's point out, this was kind of easy since we previously approved a subdivision here, and my layman's take on this is basically this is a better configured one. So kind of a no-brainer. Thank you.
All right, the next item relates to item D on the first reading, and I emphasize this only because I'm taking it a little bit out of order from what's on the agenda. This is a resolution for an easement abrogation that has been prepared for the property located at 6562 Devane Lane, which is also part of the Green Acre subdivision and approved in 2004. There's the location again. The property that we're talking about is located right about there. So on the west side of Devane Lane, and we're looking for approval on the April 10th, 2012 agenda. During the subdivision review in 2004, a wetland study identified what was believed to be a non-critical wetland located on the proposed Lot 2 of the subdivision at 6562 Devane. As such, a conservation easement was placed over the entire Lot 2. This shows an aerial with the wetland area and the lot that shows the conservation easement. Soon thereafter, staff discovered that the stormwater facilities in the adjacent Berrywood Estates subdivision, which is immediately to the west and is shown there, there was, in fact, a malfunctioning of the stormwater facilities, and that resulted in flooding of that property. Those problems, those facility issues were repaired, and at that point in time, the wetlands were no longer, the wetlands disappeared, basically. This was confirmed through analysis of our consultant at the time, as well as by a decision by DuPage County, who had the authority to make that decision at the time. So the conservation easement is no longer needed. abrogation of the existing easement will in fact allow construction of a new house on this property. So staff has determined that the existing conservation easement is no longer needed and that vacating the easement will not adversely affect the village. And staff recommends in favor of the easement abrogation. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Putting a large red X through the area shows the abrogation. That's highly technical.
And there will actually be a giant red X painted on the lot. Thank you. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a question. I do have some, the way I understand it, this pipe that went through originally had holes in it. That was repaired, and over time the flooding the area was taken care of just by the fact that this pipe exists.
Right. The pipe to the south was malfunctioning, and what it did is it caused flooding and water to collect on this property we're talking about, and over time it became a wetland. Once the pipe was fixed, the water drained away from this lot, the wetland conditions dissipated, it's no longer a wetland, and then the petitioner in the village, the previous owner, went through the process to prove that it's not a wetland and got approval from the county, and now it's the request is to get rid of the easement over the top of it.
And that was back in 2006, 2007 time period.
Correct.
I was encouraged when I saw that I followed up on that, and the county actually returned the money, which is probably a good sign that it's...
Yes. The previous owner paid a fee in lieu of wetland banking, so that was part of the county code at the time, about $92,000, and when the county agreed that there was no longer a wetland, that developer was refunded that money.
And have we visited this previous wetland since and can...
Yes.
Okay. Because when I saw the original letter, I was like, yeah, we went out and looked at it.
It was me, actually, with Mr. Lavoie a couple times on that property. So we've also had engineers, actual qualified engineers go out. Staff engineers.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Okay, yeah, that was my major concern about the whole thing, is what we're doing with this wetland, and if that was enough sufficient. So it appears that it is, so I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments on this item? Very good. Next item, please.
And the final item on tonight's first reading agenda is a bid award in the amount of $165,550 to A-Lamp Concrete Contractors of Schaumburg, Illinois, for the 2012 pavement patching services. This was a competitive bid process, and Director Newland is here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Schnell.
Just a quick one. Since it's under what we anticipated that the contract was going to cost, is it possible to, as we go through the construction season, to do additional patching with this contract?
We would come back if we had the need to do additional patching. We would come back to the council for a change order. We think we've got the scope correct based on history of these type of patching, but given that price, if we have the need, we will come back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
That ends the first reading tonight, Mayor.
Thank you very much, sir. That brings us to item 9 on our agenda, which is the mayor's report. I have 3 items. So, Manuel, this is repeat the 3-peat or something like that? I have 3 items to, well, actually just, yeah, 3 items. 3 items to cover under the mayor's report. First one is a staple of the mayor's report, and that is a status update with respect to ComEd reliability efforts. Our ongoing effort, I'm starting to sound like it's our 3-year saga to enhance electrical reliability in the village of Downers Grove, to go where no municipality has gone before or something like that. Let me give the current update in terms of where things are at. This is again a follow-on on the town hall meeting that we held last fall, and we continue to stay in contact with representatives of Commonwealth Edison in terms of their efforts to enhance or maintain electrical reliability within our village. The 2 final equipment upgrade projects that we have discussed in prior updates are currently underway. The first is located in the far northwest section of the village, and the second is located near the intersection of Main and Maple. The village continues to track the progress on both of these projects. In addition, the village recently completed a survey regarding satisfaction of our residents with ComEd's communication efforts during the enhanced tree trimming process. The survey was targeted to residents whose properties were impacted by the enhanced tree trimming efforts that we've reported on previously. Staff is reviewing those results and will work with ComEd if any deficiencies are identified. I would be stunned if there aren't some that are brought to our attention. Also, staff will be contacting those residents who requested additional follow-up from the village with respect to tree trimming and other activities of ComEd. And I also note and will share with the village manager input that we received recently from Ms. Crawford, the Chamber of Commerce, with respect to some power bumps, which is not a term I was familiar with, going on over at 2001 Butterfield Road. Apparently they are waiting to hear back, representatives there are waiting to hear back from their contacts at ComEd to the extent that we can assist and facilitate using our collective girth, if you will. That would be useful. Next item I want to report on was mentioned earlier by Commissioner Renken, and that is the DuPage County Stormwater Committee met this morning and had a very robust debate about one particular issue concerning the proposed new stormwater ordinance from the County of DuPage. The good news is, because everyone's been anxiously awaiting the passage of this new ordinance, that the committee unanimously approved its adoption and has been forwarded to DuPage County Board for approval by the full board later this month. And we are, my understanding is it's on a schedule for adoption and implementation along the same timetable that was proposed some time ago. I have some materials which we'll share and get out in terms of public education efforts that will be undertaken by the county so that both developers and residents and stakeholders alike will be more familiar with what the changes are, how they will be explained to residents of the county, and what impact they might have. But this is something that's been over almost a year and a half in the works. There's been a lot of information out there about it. The general consensus is that by far it is an improvement over the old ordinance, and thus the desire to get this enacted. That said, there are some issues that municipalities and developers have still raised, as well as those who are concerned with water quality measures. We wanted to make some additional changes, but everyone understood that you can't make a perfect ordinance every time, all the time, or you'd never pass anything. You'd be working on it forever. The issue in particular was what buffer should be utilized with respect to development in riparian areas. So that'll be our Merriam-Webster word of the day, riparian areas. Some debate about whether it should be, as was originally defined, to be the floodplain. That's the old ordinance. The new ordinance says that it should be a minimum of 15 feet unless science indicates it should be something else, and that would be the decision of county staff. There was a push from those who have a particular interest in water quality issues that it should be a minimum of 100 feet. The effort to amend the current ordinance to reflect the 100 feet limit did not pass, but it was a split vote that it didn't pass on, so it's certainly an issue I think there will be more discussion on in the future. But all in all, the good news is that the committee adopted the ordinance, recommended it for adoption by the DuPage County Board, and I think, again, the general consensus is that it is a improved, greatly improved ordinance that I think many are looking forward to having it implemented. So that's a report on that. And the last thing I just wanted to report on is also some very good news. The Village of Downers Grove, of course, often will comment on how we pride ourselves in good financial stewardship and how we take care, try to do our best to take care of our financial standing generally, and we think we do a pretty good job about it. But it's also nice to be recognized by outside objective organizations. The village received information today from Standards & Poor's that affirmed our AA+ rating, which of course is far better than, what's that other entity outside our borders? The state of Illinois, that's it, yes. And just a few bits of information I'd like to share with everyone from the report we received today with respect to that rating, because I think it reflects well upon the efforts of this council and staff in the community to continue to be good financial stewards of public assets. Standard & Poor's Rating Services has assigned its AA+ rating to the Village of Downers Grove's Series 2012 General Obligation Bonds. The outlook is stable. The stable outlook reflects Standard & Poor's expectation that Downers Grove will continue to maintain balanced operations and very strong reserves. The village has consistently demonstrated an ability to make structural budget adjustments in response to adverse conditions, and we expect this to continue. The village's close monitoring of daily operations, combined with an emphasis on identifying long-term budget challenges and strategies, supports our expectation that balanced operations will continue. Downers Grove's financial management practices are considered strong under Standard & Poor's Financial Management Assessment, indicating that practices are strong, well-embedded, and likely sustainable. The village develops its budget using various sources of data, both historical and current, to support its revenue and expense assumptions. The village monitors its revenues and expenditures and investments carefully and provides monthly reports to elected officials. Downers Grove's long-term financial plan and capital improvement plan both span at least 3 years and are updated annually. A formal debt management policy provides parameters for debt issuance, and a formal reserve policy outlines minimum permitted cash levels. Again, that's a fairly ringing endorsement of our current financial situation from an outside objective organization. Congratulations to village staff for all their hard work to make that possible, and of course we see the benefits of this bond rating when we go out for our bond issuance, whether it's 10 or 25 or 35 or 50. That translates into real savings for our community, so that's good news for everyone. And that ends my report, and that brings us to item 10, manager's report.
We have one item on tonight's manager's report. It is an update to our electrical aggregation efforts, and our new expert in all things electricity, including ComEd and aggregation, our management analyst Allison Deitch will present tonight's report.
Well, thank you. We're looking forward to an electric presentation.
I will try. Thank you. Good evening. Purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide an update on the next steps in our aggregation process. Oh, that's neat. Okay. You've seen this slide before. I showed this 4 weeks or 3 weeks ago when we talked about the process of aggregation. It has 4 general steps. In general terms, we are now at step 2. We've passed the referendum and we are preparing to present a plan of governance for review by the community. After that, we would have a competitive bid process, and then finally the opt-out process that would take place prior to switching over to the alternative retail electric supplier. Here's a little more detail on the current status of the program. The village now has the authority to transfer the electricity supply for residents and eligible small commercial businesses to what is called an alternative retail electric supplier. The benefit to our residents is that we will only accept a bid that lowers their supply rate. In other communities that have completed this process, the savings to residents has been between 15 and 30%. So as we continue this process, we are at a decision point. We have 2 options. In December, the Village Council authorized a letter of intent to join with several other municipalities to form an aggregation group. We're not obligated to continue with the group. However, it is important to know that either way, the bid process would be fair and competitive, and only bids that lower the supply rate for electricity will be accepted. So we have 2 options. We can formally join the group through an intergovernmental agreement, or we can move forward and initiate our own program. Because there are several municipalities in the same position that we are currently, we may be able to look for other partnership opportunities. Our staff recommendation at this point is to proceed independently. In this process, we would run our own program, including drafting and approving our own plan of governance and setting the schedule for public hearings as well as for the bid process. We've identified some benefits to our own, to creating our own village program. First of all, we've received feedback from residents throughout this process. We've also received a policy recommendation from the Environmental Concerns Commission that asks the village to consider a power mix that includes 25% green power. By drafting our own plan of governance, we can incorporate the feedback we've received, and we can take into consideration the comments we hear at public hearings. Additionally, we've been able to speak with staff members from other municipalities that have already completed the process, and they've been able to share some important lessons learned that we believe will make our process effective. One other thing I should add up here is that we would have the ability to plan for the length of the contract. And then also, by moving forward without the assistance of a consultant, we ensure that our residents do not pay any fees above the electricity supply rate. This is not unheard of. There are a few other municipalities that have done this, including the partnership of Grays Lake, Lincolnwood, and Oak Brook, which partnered to do this last year without a consultant. A few last points here. By leading the process, we are able to manage the schedule, and the council would have the opportunity to review and accept the supplier bid. And finally, as we look into some partnerships, we would look for municipalities that would most likely accept our plan of governance and our schedule. So this takes us forward to our proposed schedule for our aggregation process. And I should say first that this is a proposed schedule, that this may change as we go. But overall, we're proposing a schedule that would allow a switchover date in mid or late summer. So it's tentative, but it would, we believe anyway, it would get us to a switchover date later this year. Hope you can see this. The plan of governance we are hoping to publish next week according to this schedule to make available for community review. We are required to have 2 public hearings prior to adopting the plan of governance and an ordinance authorizing the purchase of electricity. Those would take place at the 1st and 3rd council meetings in May. After we do that, we will be able to, actually work on the bid process. We are hoping to do that in the week of May 21st, 2012, which would then allow us to award the contract for the purchase of electricity on June 12th, 2012. The opt-out process would take place for several weeks prior to the switchover date, and we would then implement the new contract, or as it's called, the switchover, in August and September of 2012. Like I've said a few times, this proposed schedule could change, but our goal is still for it to take place in late summer, and we will, of course, update the timeline as we make any changes on our village website. And we are also continually updating our frequently asked questions on the website. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Before I turn to the council, I'll just ask if there are any questions from any members of the audience with respect to electrical aggregation, next steps. It's a high voltage topic with a lot of juice behind it, so if anybody has any questions or comments, just making sure you're all awake out there. Yes, please. Of course, don't run away, Allison. We'll be
Good evening again. I'm Gordon Goodman, 5834 Midaw, and I wanted to rise in support of the staff's recommendation. I think it's very wise for us to look around at the various opportunities that are opening up in light of the referenda that have been passed throughout the area. I think this staff recommendation is very close to the ideas that we were advancing to the council in a letter written by Pierce Downers Heritage Alliance and sent over the signature of our chair, Ken Lerner, some weeks before the referendum, and we did get some favorable responses from some members of the council. So I'm hoping that the council will be sympathetic with the staff's recommendation. I did have a question about this. It seems that with this very tight, relatively tight timetable, that the staff must have already prepared a fair amount of work toward this possible plan of governance in order to be able to publish it shortly and hold hearings. I'm wondering if that's true, and secondly, I'm wondering if there's any role for the Environmental Concerns Commission in this consideration. I didn't see that as part of the timetable that we were presented with. Thank you.
Good news, Dr. Goodman and Council. We have been working diligently on our own plan of governance. It's about ready to go. And we did check in with the Environmental Concerns Commission a couple months ago and got some policy recommendations from them. And in fact, those are the ones that Allison mentioned, that we should pursue options for renewable or green energy. And you'll see once the plan of governance is published, that's exactly what we're calling for. Some options that could be considered once the bids come in.
Thank you. And thank you for the questions. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to electrical aggregation next steps? Questions or comments from the council, Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. You know, based on doing this independently, how is that going to affect our ability to get a good rate? I remember from the previous presentations we had, it was a volume because there were so many communities and the number of.
Yeah, what we found is
how's that going to play out for us if we go independent with this? Because I know there are some concerns.
Yes, there are economy of scale opportunities at work in the market, and we've researched that quite a bit. We want to make sure that what we do results in the lowest possible price for our residents and small businesses. We found that we're of a size on our own that has already gone to market. I think Allison mentioned a couple of towns that got together that the three of them were the same size as Downers Grove, and they got a very competitive rate.
The three of them combined were the same size as
The three of them combined were the same size as Downers Grove, and they got a very competitive rate, a rate very similar to communities that had gone together and were significantly larger. We will continue to look at how the economy of scale effects interact with how many fees and how much fees we would have to pay. Under the Will County Governmental League proposal that we've been working on, there'd be $60,000 worth of fees that would have to be paid for by the residents in small businesses. Right. Under this proposal, there would be no fees on top of, we would just be doing this work on their behalf. So we have to balance the amount of fees and the impact of an economy of scale. We will continue to work on those issues as we look for partnership opportunities. And frankly, if Will County Governmental League continues to address our concerns about value, fees, responsiveness, and the plan of governance to the needs of our residents, then we'll continue that dialogue with them. Those are our main concerns. I do want to note that I did talk to Hugh O'Hara from the Will County Governmental League today on those issues. We'll continue with that dialogue shortly. And most of all, I just want to thank them for reaching out to us early on when we were not part of a council of government. They've been very helpful, and we've learned a lot from them. And even if we go this alone or end up somehow back with them if they address our concerns that were identified, very appreciative of their efforts.
Other questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Waldeck?
I'll agree with Commissioner Durkin's concerns. I think there's power in numbers, and I still believe that. I'm a little concerned if we go it alone, especially if we're on a tight schedule. Like I say, I tend to agree with the power in numbers. And you mentioned that the reduction in rates was between 15% and 30%, and if we could get a report back on which one's got the 15, which one's got the 30, did they go it alone, did they go as a group, get some comparisons so that we can see who got the 30 and copy the folks that got the 30. There's also been a lot, and this is just a comment, there's been a lot written out there about government taking over and that kind of thing. And I'm glad this referendum passed, because for some time I've been getting a lot of stuff in the mail from companies saying, quit ComEd and join us and we'll save you money. And they all describe different things, and I go, gee, I wish I had an expert that would help me make this decision. And bottom line is, I can make this decision anytime I want on my own anyway. So I'm kind of glad, I am glad that the referendum passed, that maybe we can get some expert opinions in here and work as a group, get a better deal for everybody. And if I really don't trust my government, I can still go out and do it on my own and see if I can get a 30% or maybe wind up paying even more than ComEd charges. So, but anyway, just to let the folks know out there that this is a possible great benefit for everybody, and it's nothing like the power grabs that people are talking about. It's not that at all. And that's all I have. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Schnell?
The only thing is, I wish we could get this going so that peak electric season, which is the summer, our residents could actually see the power of lower rates, but obviously that's not going to happen. Well, we may happen towards the end of it, but I guess it will give us an opportunity to find out how much we can save next summer. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
Thanks, Mayor. Just something, you guys put the ICC link up on the website, which I appreciate. Another thing I was wondering if we could do, I'm not trying to just create work, but for those at home that are wanting to watch this and review it and think it through, is it possible to take, I think we've had 3 or so presentations. I think we had one early on from Integris, one from Will County, and a couple maybe from Allison. Mm-hmm. Could we somehow snip those and put those up so people can access them quickly when they're on the aggregation site?
Yes.
That'd be great.
right, maybe put some Michael Bublé in the background, keep it entertaining. Commissioner Rankin?
I know we're going to see the plan of governance next week, but when you talk about the power mix, are we planning on bidding it so you could see, so we can decide once the bids come in, how it's going to play out?
Yes, absolutely. The example that we've looked at is Oak Parks. They did a few different mixes in their bid documents, and the council was actually able to look at what the best rate would be and what the mix would be if they had a different option. So we're anticipating having several options in the bid documents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think the consistent theme on this entire topic from day one has always been about options. First of all, having the option to do something other than ComEd, and then once you go through that door, you have more doors you can choose. As Commissioner Waldeck mentioned, at the end of the day, if you don't like what Downers Grove is proposing, despite or regardless of which way they end up arriving at it, you can opt out and you don't have to do it our way at all. So this is all about options, and I appreciate that we originally, when we first started down this path prior to the referendum, wanted to have an option that we could jump upon right away if the referendum had passed, and that I think it made good sense to have reached out to the Will County Governmental League and to have at least had an option available with a non-binding arrangement that if we wanted to, we could go that path and sign up with them and be done with it. But I think consistent with the Downers Grove way and preserving lots of options, I think it's also equally wise to have not committed ourselves irrevocably to that position, but instead, now that we know the referendum is passed, we now know a number of other communities in DuPage County and in surrounding areas have also passed these referendums, that there are other options. And I think really all we're talking about is exploring other options, because at the end of the day, we want to get the best outcome for our residents if they choose to participate, because ultimately residents have the option of whether or not to go with our option. So there's lots of options here. So that's all I see this as being, as, you know, if we were to go the independent route, the three principal benefits would be, number one, that we would be able to do this in what I've referred to as the Downers Grove way, or our governance model, whereas otherwise we would be signing on to an existing governance model that started a long time ago, and quite frankly, they're not going to stop in their tracks and change everything just for us. But we may end up going that route anyway. I mean, we're not saying that we're not foreclosing the option of the Will County Governmental Group, as Manager Fieldman mentioned. We're just opening up, making sure that we have other options to weigh and consider. But so, at any rate, the three advantages I see would be, number one, doing this the Downers Grove way, which would be bids and comparing things like we like to do and have meetings and openly discussing it. I know we've gotten some feedback from our residents who voted in favor of the referendum that they would like to do this the Downers Grove way, and so I think we're being sensitive to that. The other advantage is cost. We know what the cost is of pursuing the Will County Governmental League. If there are ways to get the same place at a lower cost, then it would only make sense for us to pursue those. And the third option is more options. For example, going it our way allows some additional opportunities in terms of green energy, renewable energy that aren't currently available but might be available in the Will County Governmental League model. As the manager pointed out, there's also the advantage of additional options for us in terms of timing and the terms of an agreement. We have more flexibility. So again, we could still pursue the Will County Governmental League option. We're not foreclosing it, but I think it's only smart and prudent to be exploring other options. And if there are other communities in DuPage or elsewhere that we would partner up with, that it would be a better deal, then I think that would be worth pursuing. Again, we get to control, if we do it ourselves, what the term is. We can fix the term, so no matter what we do, we're not only committing to a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be. Kind of like when you roll over a CD. You get to choose your term and what benefits you get from that. And then at the end of the day, again, residents can choose whether or not they want to participate in whatever option we select. So again, I think the moral of the story and the theme of the day are options, options, and more options. So I appreciate staff bringing this forward and presenting us with them, because it's one thing that we do like, we like options.
Thank you, Mayor. That ends the manager's report.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the attorney's report. Item 11.
Thank you, Mayor. Only two items to present this evening. One is an ordinance amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance to rezone the property located at 6622 and 6700 Fairview Avenue, and a resolution approving the final plat of subdivision for 6622, 6650, and 6700 Fairview Avenue. That is all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 12, council member reports and new business. Start with Commissioner Rankin.
I failed to report about this last meeting, so I apologize. Manager Fieldman and I attended the Intergovernmental Planning Committee for DuPage Mayor and Managers Group on March 15th. And one of the really interesting things that came from that was, or at least I found, that they were planning on trying to pin down ComEd to share with municipalities their 10-year plan that was promised when the smart grid legislation was passed in October. Right now, they're just giving a one-year plan, but they had promised $3.2 billion to upgrade the electrical grid. So I thought that was real interesting. And I also wanted to thank staff for working with our newly annexed resident at 75th and Webster for preventing his trees to be removed in front of his property. I just thought that was great effort, great results. So thanks very much. That is all, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just to pick up on that, I know it's probably not ripe for discussion tonight, but very soon we should have a discussion with respect to the protocol that ComEd is proposing to put forth to the ICC. There are some issues that we and other municipalities have with that, and it's probably not quite ripe to talk about, but I'm anticipating another electric presentation from Allison with respect to the protocol at some point in time, because I think that's something that also residents need to understand what that is, how it might impact us as a community. So more, stay tuned, more to be heard on that. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I originally didn't have a report, but there was a comment made earlier about the our gym in town, Good Samaritan Hospital, being a Trauma 1 center, and how it is extremely busy. And I just thought I'd mention that there is another option. You know, if you go into a lot of emergency rooms, you'll find people there that are in real emergencies and people who have aches and pains and things that need care, but not an emergency type situation. And maybe to reduce some of that crowding, I would like to suggest something that I've used recently. It's called an immediate care facility. I'm not quite sure. I probably should look it up, but I think it's like 6800 Main Street, Southside town. It's an immediate care facility. They handle sprains and things like that. So non-life-threatening, non-emergency. It's something you should look into. And I hate to say this because I walked in and got immediate care. So if I share it, maybe it won't be as immediate, but it's important that this is a service that is available, and you might want to check into it. It is online. Check out immediate care. Find out what they can do for you. That's a great opportunity, great service we have in the village. So, and it might help somebody who's really in need. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett.
Mayor, just continuing with the ComEd theme, I'm wondering if we've gotten any particular updates, and I don't need them tonight, but I'd be interested. There were half a dozen or so particularly egregious situations in town that we heard about several times last spring, and I'm just wondering if those have been addressed, if we have any updates on those. And then I'm thinking, this electric thing, whether it's the subject of aggregation or it's ComEd service or it's protocol or it's tree trimming, ComEd clearly is an important part of our residents' day in and day out lives, and I'd like to see us consider trying to do that town hall meeting thing perhaps even annually instead of just in sort of a reactive mode. The more relationship we have with ComEd, I think the better for all of our residents. So I'd like us to think about doing that, Mayor, as long as you're in touch with them regularly. Maybe you could put something like that together.
I think that's a great idea. And in fact, I know that the Chamber of Commerce has urged us to make sure that we fold in businesses because they have similar and yet unique issues with ComEd as well. And to have the conversation solely with respect to the residential aspect, while important, leads to a large number of stakeholders that have equal interest in it. So I think I would probably take that even one step further, and whether we have one mega one or two separate ones, I think having that continued kind of town hall meeting or summit or whatever you want to call it, I think is a really good idea. And I think we probably enough lead time to do something for the, bless you, to do something for the fall.
Well, storms certainly come and go, and so do political elected folks. But ComEd remains a part of everybody's life, so I'd like to see us really get that relationship sort of more entrenched and more open than it might already be after the last year's worth of efforts.
Agreed. Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, just three real short items. I just want to compliment everyone from the residents to staff to this council, to everyone who participated in this AA+ rating. This is huge. If anyone ever does any kind of research on municipalities, and you go to Standard & Poor's and you read these reports, to have a AA is a plus as we've had, and hoping down the road, especially with all this new development that's going on, which I think is awesome, with the stuff we talked about that we'll be voting on next week. I mean, it's just huge, and hopefully all that will help us get to a AAA rating. So, you know, I just want to, you know, all those budget meetings and long-range financial plans and the cuts we made and some of the stuff that we read about ourselves all over the internet on how we were bad people, you know, at the end of the day, it's all highlighted with those hard cuts. And those tough decisions we made as a group, as a whole, has really come to fruition with this document. So I just want to highlight that. And I also just want to point out and ask, you know, can we get a report out on how many building permits we've got issued so far for this year? I mean, if you look at it with what we're going to vote on next week, you know, the dental clinic that's being built, I mean, I don't know how impressive that is to go down the street and see a tower crane. You know, with my new office in the city, I get to see tower cranes quite a bit, and kind of looked at them like you do trees, and you kind of look past them and through them and everywhere else. But, you know, that's really economic development. So if we could get some kind of information on that, that would be great, especially with the new commercial development of ASGE. Right. It's just, you know, I think we got it right. You know, at the end of the day, we did it, and we did it right. So
we did it.
Can I smell a return of the monthly statistical report?
Yeah, well, we're still doing them, and they're out there, and we will highlight a couple of things. When we did the S&P ratings call, we actually toured them through the village of Downers Grove, and one thing they noted was the return of the residential market and the strong commercial market, ASGE, Midwestern University on both campuses, and the activity at all the car dealers on Ogden Avenue. So we do have some good news to share, and we will put it in Friday's manager's report for you, Commissioner.
Right. And thanks to Commissioner Durkin for your second family, Bentley. We appreciate that. Sales tax revenue is much appreciated.
No, it's called Honda. And with that, I just want to wish everyone a very happy Easter. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
Just, if people are looking for a place to celebrate Easter as far as food goes, I would encourage people to think locally. We have some phenomenal restaurants in our community. Great Easter brunches, great Easter dinners. Shop locally, eat locally. Again, it comes back as sales tax to the village. So, and we have some really, really great restaurants in town.
And grocery stores to buy your food at.
And grocery stores to buy your food at. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. Once again, things in threes. Three things to report out from my perspective. Number one, just want to announce, and we'll have something out shortly, because I haven't given the manager the press release yet. But Downers Grove, for the 28th year in a row, has been, or I don't know if it's a year in a row, but for the 28th year, Downers Grove has been named Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation. So obviously that's something that we think is very important. That we've earned this national honor again from the Arbor Day Foundation, which is the nation's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to planting trees. So we can once again proudly say that Downers Grove is a Tree City USA. Number two, I wanted to thank Chief Porter, the Downers Grove Police Department, and in particular Officer Tom Powers, for a program which is really pretty neat, which is the Citizen Ride-Along program that we have here in Downers Grove. Both of my teenage sons have now participated in this program. A few years ago, my oldest son did the ride-along with one of the officers, and 3 years later, he's still talking about it. Well, earlier this week on spring break, you can see what happens in the Tully family. We didn't go to Florida or Europe. We hung around at Downers Grove, and my 15-year-old went on a ride-along with Officer Powers, and he was all abuzz about it. He really enjoyed it. It's a great program. And Chief Porter mentioned to me earlier tonight that actually some police officers got their start that way, including our own Chief Porter. So who knows? There might be an Officer Tully someday down the road. But don't worry, Chief, you'll have retired long before that happens. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And then finally, of course, I need to point out that there are only 78 days left until the Rotary Grow Fest. And summer's in the air, and I know that they're already looking for volunteers. And I don't know about you, but I'm anxious for the, yes, and everything that goes with it. Our annual street festival here in Downers Grove, where it's like the world's largest block party in Downers. And I too just want to join everyone in wishing everyone a very happy Easter later this week. And we cannot adjourn at this point in time. We actually need to go into an executive session. So may I have a motion to adjourn into executive session on two different items?
Mayor Tully, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C6 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the village. And I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider litigation affecting on or behalf of the village which has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned into executive session. Thank you and good night. Happy Easter.